you're a very green Party candidate, if you don't mind me saying. You ran for the, I'm sorry, you'll have to pronounce it, the Tai
Hauauru
electorate last time, and you're running this time.
Yeah, that's right. I stood in 2011. I was actually only 18 at that stage. I was one of the youngest candidates in the country. But the reason I stood was because the Greens have never had a candidate into Tai Hauauru before. We've sort of only stood in Māori seats on an ad hoc basis, and so I really thought it was important in that election that the party vote message was spread throughout the Tai Hauauru electorate, because I've always been a believer that Māori values and Green values are remarkably similar, and so I think that Māori should be a natural constituency of the Greens, but traditionally haven't been. So yeah, my involvement in politics from that time until now has very much been on representing the Greens and Māori communities, and also representing Māori in the Green Party. So it goes both ways. Yeah.
Well, the Greens really do look like quite a realist party. Much more so than they appeared, say, 12 years ago, when they were very, they were seen as the anti-GE party and nothing else. And that's been quite an evolution. And so you'd be hoping to take that into government and continue to...
I think so. It's a really interesting area because we've had since that time of when GE was at the top of the agenda, around 2002 elections, 2005. Since then we've had a generational shift, both in our leadership and in our caucus. So there are no longer any of the first generation of Green Party MPs in Parliament. There are many of the caucus of fresh faces. So I think it's fair to say there has been a change in style from the Green leadership and the MPs, but not a change in substance. I mean, our vast majority of our policy hasn't changed, our values certainly haven't changed. There is a greater focus on talking about the green economy and our economic credentials, but that's because the economy is obviously one of the most important issues to New Zealanders, and so we just, I think, need to focus on our different priorities and not be pigeonholed as being a solely environment-focused party or a party only focused on fringe issues, because we're certainly not.
That's right.
Okay, so yeah, you were saying that the Maori seats wanted to be everything, and that there needs to sort of be viewed in a more fluid way in the context that we grow and change.
Absolutely, and that's why I think it's crucially important that we do have Māori standing general seats as well. We do have Māori on party lists, and I think that is partly why the Māori Party, which tried to be a pan-Māori party representing all Māori, is just never going to work in my opinion. I think that we need Māori in all of the different parties, progressing the kaupapa Māori view in the context of the politics of those parties. And so, that's why I think it's good that there are National Party ministers who are Māori, as an example. But of course, it's also really important that they don't forget the roots and that they don't actively work against Māori interests, which is too often the case.
Well, it's the obvious rebuttal to the rather foolish arguments that were put forward some decades ago now about Maori seats, that it was some kind of, it reminded people of apartheid South Africa, and that would be true if Māori were confined simply to the Maori role. But no, from what you're saying, that completely eliminates that.
Yeah, no, I think that's just a ridiculous argument to have myself. As I said, the Māori seat started out as a form of limiting Māori representation, and so the way they've developed is that they supplement Māori representation in Parliament and ensure that there is at least some grounding and some representation for a kaupapa Māori viewpoint. I think that's really cool.
More broadly on the Green Party, what contribution do you see in this region for the Green Party? What can the Green Party do for people here, not just in Palmerston North, but in the wider Manawatu?
Sure. Well, I think there are a number of things we can do. If you look at the three priorities that we had at the last election, they were kids, rivers, and jobs. So if we look first at the jobs issue, what the Green Party would be able to benefit this region and rural economies more generally is through an investment in the clean green economy. We want to transition the economy, put it on a more sustainable footing. And so there are a number of ways we can do that. As an example, through R&D tax credits, we want to see about $1 billion available for research and development, grants, innovation more generally, support for small business, and supporting agriculture, farmers in particular, so they can be more sustainable and transition to what is going to need to be a low carbon to zero carbon economy. Or if you look at the rivers issue, obviously if you look at the Manawatu River, it's one of the most polluted rivers in the Western world. And that is because of the intensification of agriculture. Well,
so it sounds like farmers might have a bit to complain about. I've heard it said by Russell Norman that the Greens would, if they could, take measures to lower the value of the currency because we're so high. If that happened and was possible, that would offset some of the pain that farmers would get, wouldn't it? Because then they'd be able to export.
Absolutely, farmers are really doing it tough at the moment because of the overvalued dollar. And so if we can lower the value of the dollar, then we will be able to help farmers and the export sector more generally increase their exports. And actually, what we're particularly keen on is the idea of value add, the idea that we sell, really high quality products for good prices in the global market. We don't just sell, milk powder, large quantities of milk powder at low prices, because that's obviously going to impact negatively on our environment and isn't the sort of high value, low carbon economy that we could have. And of course, lowering the value of the dollar has many other benefits as well. It reduces inflationary pressures, and so we could see reductions in power bills and in-house prices.
And we'll get more tourists, won't we?
Exactly. And I mean, if you look at it, some of our biggest industries, namely agriculture and tourism, rely on our clean green brand. And at the moment, that clean green brand has been attacked and hacked at constantly by the key government. And so, we can't just rely on what we've been doing. We actually have to protect the environment, because the environment is the basis of the economy. I mean, that's just basic economics, but it seems that many in the two major parties just don't understand that concept.
Could I ask, do you have a particular favourite former Prime Minister, and why? Because the answer could be repeated.
Yeah, well, I think my favourite former Prime Minister is probably Peter Fraser. He was the second Labour Prime Minister. He was the deputy under Michael Joseph Savage in the first Labour government, and then when Savage died, he took over.
And then he died himself.
He did, but after about 9 years as PM, and during that time, he pretty much built up our welfare state. particularly education and health. He was the minister of those areas, and so he really, I think, laid the foundation of what the New Zealand political representation can be. And he, of course, led New Zealand through World War II, and I think he was really New Zealand's only international statesman.
How do you view the Maori seats? It's a very misunderstood area in our political system, really. And the National Party, I believe in 2008, said once treaty settlements are completed, we can abolish the seats. How do you see that issue?
Well, if you go back historically and look at the history, in the late 1800s, the Māori seats were created as a way of limiting Māori representation in Parliament, because of course the Māori population was, if not the majority of the country at that time, it was a very large part of the country, the Māori population, and so the colonial government at the time created these 4 Māori seats and limited Māori representation to those seats. But in the modern context, the Māori seats, in my opinion, are extremely important because they've become an anchor of Māori political aspiration. And although often the argument that's used against the Māori seats is that we now have a lot of Māori on either as list MPs or in general electorates. But if you look at it, a lot of those MPs don't represent kaupapa Māori values. They don't necessarily fight for iwi, fight for hapu and Māori aspirations generally. So the Māori seat, if you're an MP in the Māori seat, you have to, those are your constituents, that's who you work for. And so you're right that the National Party is opposed to Māori seats, really. I think one of the few good things that the Māori Party has achieved in government is actually to ensure those Māori seats remain, at least in the short term. So that's going to be, that struggle, I guess, will continue. The Greens' position on it is that the Māori seats should remain until Māori themselves no longer feel it necessary. And I think that we're a long way from that. And if that were to happen, we need, I think, more properly fleshed out constitutional arrangements that reflect Māori representation. One idea that's been put forward that I'm quite supportive of is the idea of a treaty house, of an upper house of parliament, 50% iwi or hapu representatives and 50% representatives of the general population. And so that could be one way of analysing all legislation that goes through Parliament for a treaty analysis. And if that were to happen, which is unlikely in the short term, but if something like that were to happen, then the Māori seats may no longer be necessary. But in the current political climate, I think that it's vitally important that the Māori seats remain and grow.
Do you have a final word?
I just thank you for inviting me, and it's fantastic that I think that you're setting up this resource. We have low voter turnout in New Zealand, increasingly so, and I think it's fundamentally important that we increase political participation, I think particularly among young people, and so any resource that works towards that is fantastic. So, great work.
Cheers. Well, we have to get it back up to at least 85%, really.
Yeah.
Before anyone can say, I claim a mandate to do anything.
Exactly.
Oh, Jack McDonald, thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to meet you.
Me too.